Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media with myself, Salano Makudir. The time is 13 minutes past 8, and we'll be shifting our focus now north of our border as Zimbabwe faces a crucial moment in its political landscape. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has announced his intention to step down. When his second term comes to an end in 2028, despite some calls within the ruling party for him to extend his term, Mnangagwa has affirmed his commitment to the constitution, stating this question of the third term does not arise, especially under my watch. That's quoting him verbatim. He also continues to say, I'm a constitutionalist and he wants to follow the law. But on a broader sphere, what does this mean for Zimbabwe's future? Will this transition mark a new chapter in the nation's political journey, or will it bring more uncertainty? And to help us unpack all of these questions and developments, is Dr. Tadina Masaya, Information Secretary of United Zimbabwe Alliance. He's joining us virtually. Tadini, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
No, thank you very much for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here.
I think as South Africans, we always have a keen eye on what's happening in Zimbabwe. You guys are our closest neighbors. We have strong historical and current ties. Lots of Zimbabweans currently residing in South Africa. And I just want to touch on the point that I make when I was doing my intro. Political certainty or uncertainty. That announcement from President Mnangagwa. Where does this lean more for you? Is it something to be excited about? The constitution and the rule of law being followed, something that's not very popular here on the continent, or is it again Zimbabwe going into uncharted waters and another era of uncertainty awaiting the country?
No, thank you very much for the question. Firstly, I would start by saying this is most likely a facade. Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, out of respect of the office that he holds, is most likely following a script that we have seen a lot of dictators before him follow, where you pretend you do not want to remain in office, then you have your minions continuously call for you to stay in office. And then at the end of the term, you say, it was not my desire, but it was the desire of my people. His predecessor, Robert Mugabe, pulled the same stance on several instances where people were expecting him to step down. Then you would have at least 1 million people march into the cities in the capital city, and then claim that the youth want me to still stay. So why should I leave power when my people say I am not done with my job? If there was some form of uniformity across the political party, whereby he is saying that he will not continue, and the rest of the political party is also saying that he will not continue, I would give him a bit of the benefit that maybe he's telling the truth. But in all likelihood, this is the same script that we have seen playing across the whole continent of Africa, where a dictator claims they want to leave, and then there is a group that constantly is clamoring in the corner to say that, no, we want you to stay because you're doing an awesome job. And then at the end, he ends up staying because supposedly he's following the wishes of the people of Zimbabwe.
I want to focus on the plus minus 7 years that President Mnangagwa has been in office. I think the well documented quote unquote coup was celebrated by a lot of Zimbabweans. I mean, I think we've seen on our television screens people are hooting, excited that finally there are people that their whole lives have known only one president, which was former President Robert Mugabe, and finally after so many years of his iron fist rule, a new leader was coming to the fore. 7 years on, what's the general sentiment about President Emmerson Mnangagwa, according to a lot of Zimbabweans, in Zimbabwe and also in the diaspora?
Yeah, I think the general sentiment is that nothing has changed. Everything continued as it was with President Mugabe. And expecting it to change was being overly optimistic, because if you look at it, Mugabe did not rule alone. Mugabe always had someone next to him, and that someone happened to be Emerson Mnangagwa. So whatever mistakes that Mugabe was making, he was not making them alone. He was making them assisted and most likelihood having a clap from ululation from Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa. So everything continued, and I think South Africans can testify to this fact. Your borders are still being flooded by Zimbabweans. We are still the Mexico of South Africa. For obvious reasons, things are not functional in Zimbabwe. And so when they were not functional with Mugabe, they are still not functional with Emerson Mnangagwa. So what do people do? They take the next easiest route, which is go to a country that has some resemblance of normalcy and try to seek greener pastures there. So I think the evidence is in the pudding. And nothing has changed. If anything, things have worsened. If we're talking about the Iron Rule, recently, I'm sure you are aware of the 79, the 79 members of the CCC that were arrested merely for gathering together to celebrate um, um, the achievements of independence in South Africa, or the display of valor by those that died in Soweto, trying to achieve freedom. You see, and that was a threat, and we had a lot of other arrests that followed simply because he was anticipating Zimbabweans to show displeasure during the recently ended SADC summit, where he was appointed the SADC chair. So nothing has changed, and to also expect that if he were true to his word and he would actually step down in 2028, something would change is another misguided view. Because if he were to step down, who is the most likely person to replace him? His vice president, the retired General Dr. Chiwenga. He has also been in the picture for the longest time. And if you were to look at the gentleman's work and his history, he's not an inch away from the former president Mugabe. He's not an inch away from Emerson Mnangagwa. In all likelihood, it would be a luta continua. The problems of Zimbabwe and the struggle would continue.
I wanna focus a bit on that because south of the border here in South Africa, it looks like there's almost a vacuum of a new kind of leadership in Zimbabwe. It looks like opposition politics are very, very weak, and it looks like the problems that have plagued Zimbabwe, I think, for the longest of times, even before the economic meltdown of 2008, are never ending. In your opinion, what kind of leader does Zimbabwe need right now? And why is it seemingly a vacuum in that space? Why does it seem like there's a lack of active opposition politics in Zimbabwe? It seems the status quo, as you mentioned, the current deputy president is more or less the same leader as former President Mugabe and current leader Mnangagwa. These are people who come from the same school of thought. They've been in politics together for the longest of time, ever since Zimbabwe gained its independence. Why does it feel like there's no a new generation of leadership coming out of Zimbabwe that's willing to challenge the status quo, and that shows glimpses of hope to Zimbabwe, which evidently the southern block of the continent and Africa as a whole needs Zimbabwe to function, for everyone else to function, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the first question, what kind of a leader does Zimbabwe really need at this particular moment in time? I think it needs a leader that the current president is pretending to be in his statement that he's a constitutionalist. It requires someone who can stick to the rule of law. And if we were to be able to follow our constitution, in all likelihood, we would be able to attract investment, we would be able to see a just society. People would not be complaining about a military state, they would not be complaining about a captured judiciary, and we would not be seeing the atrocities that we're seeing if we had that kind of leader. That of course, just being one of the key attributes that the leader would have to have that I'm pointing to. And that leads me to say we do have leaders like that. A key example is Madame Valerio, and she has stepped up ever since 2022 to say, okay, I am joining the fight for a new Zimbabwe by throwing in my name into the hat to become the next leader of Zimbabwe, or the part of the crop of leaders of Zimbabwe. The major problem that we have is the current regime does not like the coming up of new leaders. So it will do everything that it can do to make sure that it kills out any leader or any opposition and that comes to them. Try and make sure they do not give them enough room for them to grow and for the people to hear the message that they are preaching. And that is why it might seem as if we do not have the right crop of leaders. We do not have new leaders that are coming up. It is merely that they're existing in a territory where they have been heavily stifled. And they are fighting to be heard. And this is why we are having this conversation, because I would like to consider myself that I am part of that crop that is coming up to challenge the status quo. Now, when it comes to ZANU-PF itself, why the leadership never changes? One, it is beneficial to them to continue on this line of operating a nation as if it is a mafia. There's a lot of kickback from it. You've seen that all of them are extremely wealthy, while the rest of the nation is in abject poverty. They have offshore accounts, amazing mentions. You talk about the Mugabes, you talk about the current regime, etc. So they will see no need for them to change their style of leadership as long as it is beneficial to them. At the core of it, they are not seeking to make life better for Zimbabweans as a whole, but rather they are seeking to make life better for them as the ruling elite. And this is why it never changes. And the problem that I spoke about that affects the whole nation also affects the political party of the ruling political party. The old guns will not give an opportunity to the younger ones unless they are following in their line and are only there to clap hands for them and agree with whatever it is that they say. So I think that is the critical problem. But opposition is rising, opposition is reorganizing. There has been a destabilization of opposition, but we're definitely finding our foot and reorganizing. There's been a lot of lessons. There is need for new leadership. That is why we're stepping into the space, correcting the mistakes that have been made by our predecessors and improving from there. The struggle for a better Zimbabwe continues.
I want to take a quick break, but then when we come back, I want to focus on two key issues. One, there's been a lot of criticism on South Africa's government and how they've essentially, turned a blind eye when it comes to, well, their twin. This is how we view ZANU-PF when it comes to their relations with ANC, essentially twins, two organizations that have the same thinking and are cut from a same kind of cloth. The relationship between Pretoria and Harare and how South Africa hasn't been as stern when it comes to condemning the Zimbabwean government and some of the major atrocities that they're committing in the country. And secondly, I want to focus on what is increasingly becoming a warm relationship between Zimbabwe and China. I think it was yesterday when I read an article that China and Zimbabwe have reaffirmed their comprehensive strategic partnership of cooperation, signing over 17 major deals between the two countries. And your thoughts on that? South Africa's government and how they've been dealing with the Zimbabwean regime. I think we can call it that at this point, and also the warming of these relationships with China, and if indeed they're benefiting the people of Zimbabwe. But we'll touch on that a bit after the short break.
Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
After the recent attacks on Gaza, many families have been displaced with their homes left destroyed. Through your donations, our teams are on the ground in Gaza, providing support and delivering necessary aid to families affected. The people of Gaza need your help. Give hope. Donate today to Penny Appeal South Africa. www.pennyappeal.org.za 031 1100 573.
We are here on the ground with Penny Appeal organizations in Gaza.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, bakkies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
One child, one dream.
A journey with Africa Muslims Agency that began 3 years ago has changed the lives of Syrian and Palestinian refugee children beyond their dreams. Help them to continue their education by sponsoring a student at the Amman School of Excellence in Lebanon for 25,200 Rand per year. Education at Amman can provide a brighter future for refugee families.
AMA, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Are you planning a wedding, birthday party, corporate event, or any special occasion? Kani's Catering Services got you covered. Our catering services are here to elevate your event to unforgettable heights. From tantalizing appetizers to mouth-watering main courses and desserts, our culinary creations are crafted with passion and precision to delight your guests' taste buds. Our spit braai is a talk of the town. Indulge in succulent, tender meats, slow roasted to perfection over an open flame. Kani's Catering Services chefs bring creativity and expertise to every dish they prepare, ensuring that each bite is a culinary masterpiece. We take care of your guests while you relax and enjoy every moment of your function. Whether it's plated meals to a simple buffet, we are on top of it all. Ready to start planning your perfect event? Get in touch with us today to discuss your catering needs and request a personalized quote. Let us take your event to the next level with our exceptional catering services. Kani's Catering Services, situated at number 373 Jabundlovu Street, Pietermaritzburg. Call now 033 342 3511 or email us on info@kanis.co.za for Pietermaritzburg and surrounding areas only. Visit www.kanis.co.za.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back, guys. Still tuned in to Salam Media. The time is 8:38 2, and we're still discussing Zimbabwe. I think the most important news coming out is that Zimbabwe's president announced plans to step down in 2028, and we're speaking to Tadina Masaya, United Zimbabwe Alliance Information Secretary. Tadini, thank you so much for staying with us. I think before we went to the break, I mentioned 2 issues that I would like us to tackle before we wrap up. Number one, the inaction of Pretoria and the South African government when it comes to intervening to some of the atrocities that the current ZANU-PF government has perpetuated against the people of Zimbabwe. This is by no means saying, South Africa is Zimbabwe's big brother, as we've heard from a lot of Zimbabwean officials saying, we're a sovereign state and, we are not in any case a child or little brother of South Africa. But then again, their actions in a lot of ways do affect South Africa. As you mentioned, a lot of Zimbabweans pouring into South Africa looking for greener pastures, something that you can't blame them for doing. And you have South Africans complaining, and this is at the detriment of the South African government, which has, gone and let ZANU-PF and the government of Zimbabwe literally handle their affairs with impunity. Your thoughts on that, relations between Pretoria and Harare and the 2 twin governments, that is the ANC and ZANU-PF?
There is a historical background. They are definitely patting each other on the back. The unfortunate thing is these are brothers that cannot reprimand each other. And therefore, one is clapping hands for the other, or at least the other is heading straight for a cliff. The unfortunate thing also is the collapse of one brother will definitely affect the other. And this is what you see with the South African people now complaining about the overwhelming numbers of Zimbabweans that are stepping into South Africa. What would have been ideal is for the South African government to be stern to address the issues that are affecting Zimbabwe and not to allow it to continue, at least not to continue with their assistance. There was, of course, a challenged election in Zimbabwe. I can go as far as to say an almost illegitimate outcome came from that election because of how it was conducted. The same thing was captured and mentioned by the SADC report from the observer mission that came to the election. But the very first person to endorse those sham elections was the South African president. Given the relationship that they have, it would have been ideal for the South African government to put weight behind the SADC report and to ask for a clear review, or even go as far as asking for a new election so that the challenges can be addressed. But we have seen that in most instances where the involvement of the South African government should have been in a positive light, it has been rather negative, like what I just mentioned. They did not put their weight behind the findings of the observer mission. Rather, they were the first to endorse the elections. But up to this day, a lot of Zimbabweans, if not most Zimbabweans, actually argue that the election was a sham. It was a facade. So yeah, the historical aspect of it, I think they're just not acting as they're supposed to. The reasons as to why, most probably they envy how the Zimbabwean government officials have been able to rip off their citizens and start to live like kings. And maybe they are asking for the same blueprint. How do we do it also? How do we do so much corruption that we can become billionaires and let our people starve?
And before we wrap up, unfortunately, we have run out of time, so we can't expand a bit on that. I want to focus on the relationship with China. I think in the last 5 years, we've seen China making a ferry into Zimbabwe. Just yesterday, about 17 major deals have been signed, reaffirming China and Zimbabwe's quote-unquote comprehensive strategic partnership of cooperation. What do you make of this? What do you make of Zimbabwe's newly found friend, China? Are they making an impact in the lives of ordinary Zimbabweans? Because we know what's happening with the West and Western countries and the sanctions they've pulled against Zimbabwe. China looking to, foster relationships and, try and, I don't know, exploit new partnerships with Zimbabwe. What do you make of this? We saw that parliament also, that beautiful new parliament that was built with assistance from China. It seems like the relationship between the two countries is growing more cordial.
I'll say this: China has over 1 billion mouths to feed. And China has been building these extractive relationships across the globe. I'm sure you are aware that they are not only in bed with Zimbabwe, they are almost everywhere. They are following supposedly their Road and Belt initiative. And we've seen the effects of that in countries such as Sri Lanka, where people almost lose their sovereignty, or at least significant control of essential parts of their nation, whether it be seaports, whether it be the railway network, or whether it be the electricity supply. And the exact same thing is happening in Zimbabwe. China is not out to look for, or is not out there to look out for other countries. They're looking out for their own population. And if there are people that are gullible, leadership that cannot sit down to make deals that are beneficial to its own people, the Chinese will take advantage, because they're only looking out for number one, themselves and their people. And that is exactly what is happening in Zimbabwe. The entry of the Chinese has definitely benefited a few that are in the corridors of power. But the rest of the Zimbabweans are complaining. They have not seen the kickback. Rather, they've been losing rights. If you notice, in most cases, people have been relocated without compensation to make way for the activities that are being done by Chinese foreigners, foreign nationals. There has been obviously the challenges in terms of basic human rights when it comes to the being in the employ of these foreign nationals. The videos have gone viral from Zimbabwe and from other African countries. They have not had the best track record, or in terms of how they are operating in other countries. And it is exactly the same in Zimbabwe. But it is not something that I would blame on the Chinese. Like I say, the Chinese are looking out for over 1 billion mouths. It is something that I would blame on the Zimbabwean government. It has not been able to sit down, set regulations, enforce them, and look for a deal that benefits its own people. Rather, they've looked for deals that benefit individual and that leave Zimbabweans and Zimbabwe in a terrible state. And this is why we definitely need new leadership. That when they're going on a negotiation table, they're not looking out for themselves. They're looking out for their people and the betterment of their people. And we haven't had that when it comes to the current regime.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Tadini, thank you so much for giving us your time and giving us those expert analysis on Zimbabwe and Zimbabwe's president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, announcing plans to step down 2028. I'm sure we'll be chatting in 2028 just to recap on whether or not he's lived up to that promise as a quote-unquote constitutionalist. But we have to leave it here for now. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much for having us on the show. Much appreciated.
Tadina Masaya, United Zimbabwe Alliance Information Secretary, indeed unpacking, I think a very, very important status quo in the current affairs of Zimbabwe, and the highlight being Zimbabwe's president announcing plans to step down in 2028. Tadini seems to think this is all a facade. He says Zimbabweans have been there before with former president, the late Robert Mugabe, also sharing those kind of sentiments. But then, he went on to rule the country for more than 30 years. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see where this one leads us, and hopefully the future of Zimbabwe turns out for the best, because for South Africa to work, for Southern Africa to work, and for the whole continent to work, we need Zimbabwe to work. They are, the breadbasket, or used to be the breadbasket of the continent, and we need them to be there again. And the inaction of South Africa's government is one that, seems to enjoy the status quo, because if they condemn their actions of their Zimbabwean counterparts, well, they'll have to take a good look at themselves because, as I mentioned before, ZANU-PF and ANC are two organizations that are literally cut from the same cloth. The modus operandi is the same. The way they run the country is similar, not the same. I think South Africa were blessed with institutions that don't allow a government to continue with impunity, as we're seeing on the northern side of the border with Zimbabwe. So, yeah, should be grateful for that. We're going to leave it here for now, but when we come back, we'll be heading over to India. We'll be speaking about the horrifying truth about women in India and the safety of women and the rate of gender-based violence in India. And this is, again, sparked by that brutal rape and murder of a young doctor in Kolkata, where it has put a spotlight on the safety of women in the subcontinent. So we'll be giving more attention on that right after this short break.